Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Glory to you, O Lord. Jesus said to his disciples, "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt loses its taste, with what can it be seasoned? It is no longer good for anything, but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city set on a mountain cannot be hidden. Nor do they light a lamp and then put it under a bushel basket. It is set on a lampstand, where it gives light to all the house. Just so your light must shine for others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your heavenly Father." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Weekend after weekend, Sunday after Sunday, week in and week out, the structure of the Mass is relatively the same. You come in, you pray a little bit, there's an entrance hymn, the priest walks up, there's a penitential rite, Gloria, the collect, and then the readings, in the middle of the responsorial psalm, the gospel acclamation, followed by the gospel. So the gospel should not be unfamiliar to anyone. If you hear a different part of the gospel reading, which comes out of the 4 books of the New Testament that are known as the Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And it's on a 3-year cycle, rotating which gospel reading you hear at Mass. So if you were to go to Mass every single day for 3 years, you would have heard the entirety of the Bible, let alone the entirety of the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the 4 Gospels. And it's no different in today's gospel reading, but there are some gospels that are really long, some gospels that are really short. And today is one of those instances where we have a really short gospel reading. Now normally, whenever you have a very short gospel reading, that's kind of an permission, it's kind of telling the priest, hey, you can make your homily very long. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that here today. But also, in the gospel reading, sometimes Jesus' message is very clear. Sometimes the message has to be inferred. And sometimes there's really no way you can relate this gospel to our lives here today. Luckily for us, Jesus' message is very, very clear, coming out of this very short gospel reading, which I just read, coming out of the 5th chapter of Matthew, verses 13 to 16. Let me read the end of today's gospel reading for you. It's a very, very pertinent meaning, and Jesus is telling us exactly what he wants. And Jesus tells us, "Just so your light must shine for others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your heavenly Father." In today's gospel reading, we hear the comparison of the salt of the earth and the light of the world to our own call as disciples. That we are to live as the salt of the earth and the light of the world. But if you noticed in today's gospel reading, Jesus also gave little clauses, little exceptions, little excuses as to why that might not always be the case. As Jesus compares it to salt losing its taste. Sometimes salt goes stale. Sometimes salt is bitter. Sometimes salt just doesn't taste right. It's a bad kind of salt. Sometimes light. Jesus says your light could be dimmed or placed under a bushel basket or something. Clouds may cover the sun. Light can be dimmed. Salt can lose its seasoning and its flavor. And that is the same with our discipleship. That is the same with our evangelization. That is the same with us as humans. And the reason, Jesus knew the reason, and that's why he put that clause in there. But the reason is very clear as to why Jesus compares our own discipleship to that of salt and that of light, which can easily be reduced and can be diminished and destroyed. And that is because he realized that we are human. And because of that, because of our human nature, because we have free will, we are imperfect. We are flawed. Every single one of us. There has never been a perfect human on the face of the earth before Jesus and Mary, the only two perfect humans, during the time of Jesus and Mary on earth, and since then. There has never been a perfect human being on this earth. And the same is very true with us here today. I can say so myself. I am nowhere near perfect. I am very flawed, very much a sinner. And the same is very true, whether you like to admit it or not, with all of us here at Mass today. Or if you're here thinking that you are perfect, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but unfortunately that is not the case. Every one of us in our lives have our shortcomings. We have our flaws. We have our imperfections. We have our errors about us. And every single one of us, for those reasons, it can bring about our downfall. As disciples, it could restrict us in our discipleship. But what we have to do, what Jesus tells us to do, is when our flaws and imperfections, when they come, which they will, begin to weigh us down and begin to dim our light or begin to have our salt losing its taste, we need to get back up and brush off our pants and start again. That is the call of discipleship that Jesus wants of us. He does not expect us to be perfect 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He knows that that cannot happen. Because we are human, we are imperfect, we are flawed. Every single person on the face of this earth has shortcomings, has flaws about them. And Jesus understood that very well. And Jesus, therefore, gave us forgiveness, gave us reconciliation, where we can turn back to Him and implore His mercy for the times that we have fallen short of our fullest potential. For the times that we've hurt others, we've hurt ourselves, whatever the case might be, whatever sin we've fallen into, whatever shortcoming we've had, whatever flaw we begin to let take over our lives, we need to realize that and go to Jesus in confession. And then brush off our pants and start again evangelizing and being the salt of the earth and the light of the world. That is our call as disciples, but Jesus realized it would not be easy. It would be difficult because of our human nature, because we are sinners, because we fall short of our fullest potential, because we are imperfect. And we also need to realize in others, this is World Marriage Sunday, and in your spouse, in your husband or your wife, if you realize that they are flawed and they are imperfect, which I'm sure you have, accept their imperfections. Rejoice over their flaws and shortcomings, because that makes them human. And if you can't get along, if there's always bickering and arguing and fighting between you because of your imperfections, you need to take a step back and realize, hey, they're only human. No more, no less than I. And I have other flaws and imperfections that they are able to accept. Why can't I accept theirs? And I always must turn it into a fight. This World Marriage Sunday, if you or your spouse always are fighting, realize that you and they are only human. And they're bound to mess up. They're bound to fall short. They're bound to make mistakes. They're bound to sin because they're imperfect, because they're flawed, because they're human. If you have a son or a daughter or a parent or a coworker, an employee or a boss that isn't perfect, accept their imperfections. Accept their flaws. Realize that they're human. They are going to mess up. Every single workplace, every single church, every single school, every single fire hall that is run by humans is bound to do good, but also to have some mess ups. To maybe have some scandal about it. To have some kind of shortcoming and imperfection about it. Every single government and legal system, from the dynasties in China, to the emperors of Japan, to the czars of Russia, to the presidents of the United States, even to the popes of the church, are human. Jesus' own 12 disciples, his closest companions, he chose humans. And he realized that there was a major error about them. that they were going to mess up, that they were going to sin, that they were going to have flaws merely because they were human. And the same is true with all of us. Jesus takes that chance with all of us to be his disciples and to be his evangelizers, to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world that he calls us to be, even though we are human, even though we are imperfect, even though we are flawed. So when you turn on the news, when you read the newspaper, and you see someone convicted of a crime, someone arrested for whatever it might be, whether that be someone in the church, someone in your workplace, someone in your family, or just someone in the community, realize, instead of saying, why would someone do that? Realize, I know why they did that. I know why they aren't perfect. It's because they're human, and they are imperfect. They are flawed. Whenever something happens in the church or the government, or your school or your workplace, it is because it is run by humans, and humans are imperfect, but that flaw is there, that imperfection is always there. Sure, they're going to do a lot of good. The church, the government, your school, your workplace, they're going to do a lot of good. But because of the fact that they're run by humans, is going to lead to some scandal, some corruption, some error. If you're out there and you're looking for the perfect boyfriend or girlfriend, the perfect husband or perfect wife, the perfect friend, or maybe the perfect job or the perfect church, I'm sorry, but as long as that person is human, as long as that church is run by humans, and as long as that job is run by humans, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to be lonely. Because there is no such thing as a perfect workplace, a perfect church, or a perfect companion in life, as long as that person is human. Because we are all human. We are all bound to make mistakes. We are all bound to fall short. And we are all bound to sin. And that is, Jesus understood that. Jesus accepted that. And accepted our imperfections. Accepted our humanity. So much so, but he still gave us the task of being the salt of the earth and the light of the world, even though at sometimes we may lose our taste. At sometimes our light would be dimmed or burned out. Because he also knew that in all the bad that comes with humanity and being imperfect and being flawed, there's a whole lot of good that comes with that too. Because we are able to go to confession. We are able to get back up and start over. Because we are human. We are going to mess up. We are going to lose our taste. We're going to lose the light of the world that we are. But what makes us disciples of Christ, and what helps us carry out our call to discipleship, is when we can get back up and start over again and go be the salt of the earth and the light of the world despite our imperfections. And when they come and they weigh us down and they make us lose our taste and dim our light, we get back up, brush off our pants, and start over. Accept the imperfections and the flaws of others, because they are no more human, no less human than you yourself. Whenever you see someone in your family or your workplace or your church, or wherever it might be, who's imperfect, who maybe did something wrong, realize, hey, they're human. Cut them some slack. Jesus cuts us all slack when he realizes that sometimes our salt will lose its taste and our light will be dim. Cut that same slack to others, because we are all human, which means we are all flawed and imperfect.